Well, we've always had challenges finding people because we employ almost 100 people in the summer. Munising is a town of 2,000 people. It's hard to find,
100 people.
100 kayak guides. I mean, these are like lifeguard people.
Yes.
They're not just your average Joe off the street. But that's the hardest part over here is just finding the people.
That's true.
So you just have to do what you have to do to get them.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff Duvernois. Speaking of extraordinary, I am still on my trip around the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I swear to God, this is God's country. One of the things that I love to do in my free time is kayak, and I knew that no tour of the UP would be complete without talking to one of the owners of probably one of the best kayaking experiences that any of us could ever hope to have. And with that being said, today I'm talking with Bill Duckwall, owner of Paddling Michigan, based out of Munising. Bill, how are you?
Just fine. Good morning, Cliff.
Good morning. So tell us, what is Paddling Michigan?
Paddling Michigan is an adventure company based in Munising, Michigan. We offer kayaking tours along with lodging, boat cruises, canoe trips, and a restaurant. So we offer a package for everybody comes up here, wants to do some kind of adventure. They've got to sleep at night and they got to eat something. So we try to provide packages where they can do all of that, or they can do it individually. They don't have to do it all together with us.
Certainly.
So we're owned as Paddling Michigan, and that's our website, paddlingmichigan.com, and that's who we are.
Nice. And when we're talking about the kayak tours, just to make sure that we're making this clear for the audience, we're actually talking about going out to
Pictured Rocks.
Pictured Rocks.
Pictured Rock.
Yes.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Everybody and their brother seems to be talking about this. So you've really tapped into something here.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we've been pretty lucky. When we started doing this, there wasn't a lot of people doing Pictured Rocks then on any great scale.
Right.
And it's something that we started and it grew.
Nice.
And it's a beautiful place to kayak. It's like paddling through Utah or something out there with the red rocks and caves and waterfalls and some wildlife. And it's just a really great adventure.
Perfect for the company that offers adventures.
Correct.
So Bill, let's take a step back here for a second. Why don't you tell us, where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in northern Indiana.
Okay.
And but I came up here in 1983.
Okay.
Okay. And I came up, I was a commercial pilot, and I came up
Nice.
with a small airline that started up here in Marquette and then was purchased by a bit larger commercial airline that I ended up flying for. And that's how I got up here. But I've always owned businesses, even with almost 30 years as a commercial pilot. I owned businesses on the side. My grandfather was one of the first automobile dealers in the United States. Knew Henry Ford, was in Indianapolis, Indiana, selling Model T Fords, and my dad was a farm equipment dealer, and I just kind of continued that on. I always liked it. And even while I was flying as a commercial pilot, I had a lot of time off that I could do small businesses on the side. So when I retired from that, and I had to retire at age 60 because I'm 81 now, but that's when I really got going with Paddling Michigan. And basically it's all been done in my retirement years. Of course, I couldn't do, all of it. I've had great staffs. I've had a great general manager named Greg Spacott that's been with me for about 15 years now. And we've been able to hire the right people and come up with the right products. And, I was just kind of the guy behind the scenes, really,
Right.
dealing with the capital type expenditures and things like that. Greg kind of ran the business more, but I still like it,
Right.
and I like to um, keep active, keep active in it. I think it's good for my brain. It keeps me challenges
Yeah.
every day, and I continue to keep going.
So let's take a trip back here in time because you talked before about, yeah, obviously being an entrepreneur, business owner is something in your DNA because it's been in your family. But you mentioned before that it was really when you had retired from being in the airlines that you really started focusing more on paddling Michigan. So my first question to you would be, where did the idea come from for paddling Michigan?
Well, this is quite a story here,
Good.
but it's kind of a neat one. Okay, while I was still flying, I owned a fishing charter company in Marquette, and we took people out fishing and um, to a place called Standard Rock, 50 miles out into Lake Superior.
Wow.
But we would get often impacted by weather. Okay, so we had clients would come up from downstate and from a distance. They couldn't always go on the day they planned and everything. So I maintained a fleet of small boats and canoes that they could use and take out uh, there. And then we also rented those on the side
Right.
too. Okay. I believe it was like in 2003. I can't remember exactly. It was just right after I retired. Um, we had a big flood northwest of Marquette at a place called Silver Lake. And that flood took out several dams on the Dead River that ran like 25 miles down into Marquette. And those uh, created a lot of damage. I mean, they lost pontoons. There were logs, trees actually floating out into Lake Superior
Wow.
and so forth. So about 2 weeks after that flood, uh, I had a company call me from, they had seen our website, okay? Yeah, they'd seen our website and they saw that we rented canoes and and they needed to come out and do a survey of uh, the waters and the damage that caused and everything. And so the gentleman said, "Well, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks, and I need 20 canoes." Well, I only had two canoes. Okay, so he said, "Well, do you take American Express?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, here's my numbers. We'll be there here's my number. We'll be there in 2 weeks."
Why could that
So
happen to me?
yeah, I know. So we went out and we bought 20 canoes. We cleaned out every place in the UP that was selling canoes, and we bought them. And they came and rented them, and everything went fine. And then it was all over. They cleaned up and did their surveys and everything, and we had 20 canoes sitting there that we had tried to figure out, well, we're going to sell these or we're going to rent or what we're going to do with them.
Right.
And we had a gentleman working for us that was a kayaker, and he said, we really should, you should try Pictured Rocks. A few people are doing that over there. Well, we knew we couldn't do Pictured Rock in canoes. They're
Right.
just not made for it.
Especially from Marquette.
So we traded those canoes, okay, for some kayaks. And that's when we started kayaking Pictured Rocks, and we drove people over. We had a little place in Marquette. We drove people over and started kayaking there. And, that was about the same time that uh, kayaking was coming on, especially as a woman's sport with health and things like that.
Sure.
I mean, it was a perfect storm came together with this whole thing,
Right.
and it all came together. So we started that, and it just grew and grew and grew, and then we realized, people needed places to stay, and that's when we got. And we thought that most people that are kayakers would probably not like to stay. They'd probably rather stay in a campground or in like a tent or a yurt, so they can camp and have a campfire and enjoy the outdoors, as opposed to just staying in a motel or a hotel somewhere.
Right.
So that's why we got into that, slowly built that business up, and ended up doing that in a restaurant. And then along the line, we added a cruise around, the dinner boat cruise around Grand Island, which we run 2 trips a day on that. So I've been lucky. I've been very lucky. Had the right people at the right time.
Right.
And that's what it is luck, having the right people at the right time. And I've made lots of bad decisions, but I've made lots of good decisions,
Right.
so that's capitalism. That's the United States.
God bless America.
That's what it is.
So then a question I got for you is that, when you're building this up, you basically, from this disaster, you have this little business that's born
Mhm.
that has potential to have legs. What I would like to do is I'd like to talk about maybe like 1 or 2 of the key challenges that you had when you were building this business up.
Well, we've always had challenges finding people, because we employ almost 100 people in the summer.
100 people.
100 people with our
That's
kayak guys
amazing.
and everything. And, Munising is a town of 2,000 people. It's hard to find,
100 people.
100 kayak guides. I mean, these are like lifeguard people.
Yes.
They're not just your average Joe off the street. I
Right.
mean, they have to have some swimming ability and everything like that. So what's helped us there is Northern Michigan University in Marquette. And that's where we get most of our kayak guides from. Okay. And then for other jobs, we use a lot of work campers that
Okay.
come in. They have RVs. They come work for us in the summer at our campgrounds and everything. And
Right.
then we always hire a cadre of girls from Jamaica to work in our restaurant, a lot, and along with locals too. But that's the hardest part over here, is just finding the people,
That's true.
so you just have to do what you have to do to get them.
Right. You talked about going to Northern Michigan to find kayak guides. Where did you get that idea from? Or was it just somebody just showed up here and said, hey, I got a bunch of buddies over there?
Well,
need
Northern
jobs too?
Michigan has an outdoor rec degree, where they
Oh,
train people. A lot of them will get a degree in that and go work for the Park Service, the National Park Service and things like that. These are outdoor people,
yes.
and they live up here. We bus them, we transport them from Marquette. They don't have to drive over here. It's about 45 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were lucky. I mean, we couldn't do it. I don't think we could be anywhere near the size we are if we didn't have that.
But that's just to think about that for a second, because when I think about taking a kayak tour and the people that are going out, I would not think that there's 100 people working behind the scenes to be able to make this happen.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a business where you had this many people
Oh,
before?
no, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. That's why I have to have help, Greg Scott. I throw it back on Greg. He's the guy that
Yes.
makes it all. He's the guy that makes it run. And then we have some sub-managers under Greg, too. Miles Glendenning is our kayak manager. Rob Stibbs is our maintenance manager, because we have like 25 vehicles, and 2 boats.
Oh,
And
wow.
so Rob keeps busy on that and everything. It's, you got to have the right people,
Yes. Yeah, for sure. For sure. For our audience, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk to Bill a lot more about paddling Michigan, also what you can expect when you come here. We'll see you after the break. Hey, if you are enjoying these great interviews, just take a moment and go to totalmichigan.com/join, and you can get these episodes sent directly to your inbox, because there's a lot more great stories coming. See you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff Duvenois. Today, we're talking with Bill Duckwall, owner of Paddling Michigan. And Bill, one of the things that I was looking at on your website that kind of caught my eye, and I got to ask you about this because it's something I just don't see every day. But up there near the top of your website, you got Uncle Ducky.
Hmm.
So talk to us. What is Uncle Ducky? Where did that come from?
Well, our company name is Uncle Ducky Outdoors LLC.
Hmm.
Okay, that's where that came. So where did Uncle Ducky come from? When I first moved up to Marquette to work for this small airline, I was about 40 years old then, but most of the young pilots working there and the flight attendants that I worked with and everything were more in their early 20s, I
Yep.
guess. Okay. So I was I think kind of the age of maybe their uncles. They recognized me as somebody being a little bit older,
Right.
or so forth. And somehow one of them started calling me Uncle Ducky. So when I would fly with these crews and everything, they would call me Uncle Ducky. So that actually started from my airline days. And then when I started Uncle Ducky Charters, which was the fishing charter business in Marquette,
Right.
that was Uncle Ducky Charters. Okay. And
Ah,
then as we grew, we changed that to Uncle Ducky Outdoors, and that's when we got into the kayaking and the campgrounds and so forth.
and it's just something that you brought with you over these
Yeah,
last.
I guess it's a catchy name, and you know, um, so we use it.
Yes,
Right.
yes, you do. And so before I want to take a little bit of a 10,000 foot view of what's going on because you've mentioned a bunch of different things. You've got kayaking, you've got canoeing, you mentioned camping. Talk to us about, talk about being a serial entrepreneur, but talk to us about the different businesses, the different packages that you have through your business.
Okay. Well, we have several different vacation packages, we call them. And as I said before, you don't have to buy a vacation package. You can just go kayaking with us, or you can just stay at our campgrounds or motel or whatever. But basically, they all will include a kayaking trip along the Pictured Rock. And we have several different trips. We have our big trip is called the paddle and hike, where you paddle the entire distance of the Pictured Rocks.
Ooh.
And then it's 12 miles, the rock portion. And then you end up at Chapel Beach, and then you hike out about 3 miles from there. So you get to, after you've been sitting all day, you get to exercise a little bit walking out.
Sure.
And then we pick you up in our bus and take you back. So that's our paddle and hike, and that's an all-day trip. Okay. And then we have another trip called the Paddler's Choice that we run twice or three times a day, actually. And that goes down to about halfway. It goes down to Lover's Leap Arch, which is the big arch that you see that most people want to see. And then we have a lunch down there at the Mosquito River and then paddle back. Okay. That's about a 6-hour trip. And then we have a 3-hour trip that is called the Taste of the Rock. That goes along some of the painted rock area where you see all the striping
Right.
and all the different colors. You get to see all those colors and a lot of neat coves and some small caves in there. Bridal Veil Falls is a big one that you'll see and do that. And it's just shorter. It's 3 hours for people who don't want to spend all day,
Right.
And then the shortest one we have is our 2-hour trip, and that's around Miner's Castle. And Miner's Castle's got a lot of caves underneath of it. So you can paddle into those caves
Oh, that's
and
cool.
everything. And that's just a 2-hour trip.
Right.
So that's the kayaking end of it. So if you want to stay with us on the same package, you have an option to stay in either of our campgrounds, Autrain Beach Campground or Paddler's Village Campground. Those
Right.
campgrounds, um, Autrain Beach is our biggest. At that campground, we've got yurts
Mm-hmm.
and we've got platform tents, more like a safari tent or
Oh,
Ernest
cool.
Hemingway type Africa tent. Okay. We've got teepees
Right.
Native American teepees,
Right.
and we got campsites where you can pitch your own tent.
Right.
But everything there, we provide all the beds, furniture in there, and everything. You need to bring your own bedding, okay? And that that's All-Train Beach. And then Paddler's Village is in Christmas. And All-Train, by the way, All-Train Beach is just across the road from one of the most beautiful beaches in Lake Superior in
Right.
South, there at All-Train Bay. Paddler's Village is in Christmas, and that is right on the water. Okay, so you can actually go down. We have a big dock there, and that's where our boat cruises run from. Also,
Okay.
okay, and there we have the platform tents and the yurt. We have Paddlers Inn Motel. Okay, so we bought a small motel on there because we have a lot of clients. To backtrack a little bit, the restrooms, the showers, and everything at our campgrounds are all common, like they are.
Right.
You know, but we have a lot of people that want their own restroom facilities and so forth. So that's why we bought the motel. So they have that. We've put some yurts in the back of that. Okay, so you know, if you want to have your own restroom and everything, then you would stay at the motel or our new location here in Munising, which is called Pictured Rock Yurt. They also have their own restroom facilities and everything. But all of it, you can still have a campfires outside.
Right.
You can grill outside. We have grills. We have picnic tables out there. And you get that experience, you know, as opposed, you can't do that in a motel. You know,
no, you can't.
you can't build a fire in front of your room in a hotel or a motel. Along from there, there was a restaurant for sale right near our Paddler's Village. Okay. So we bought that restaurant. We remodeled it. We put a big beer garden out and back. So it's, you know, it's open air and everything. We call that the Duck Pond. And we call that the Duck Pond because,
Oh, yeah.
because that was a common term used from all of our kayakers. Our kayak guides have radios on them. If they want to talk to the main office on the radio, the call sign was a Duck Pond. This told our main headquarters here, the Duck Pond. So that's what we named the restaurant, you know. And at the restaurant, we serve Lake Superior whitefish, all different types of forms, you know, burgers, salads, shrimp. And we have about 30 different types of Michigan craft beers, you know. So it's a really cool restaurant to visit too.
And when you talk about having these, because when you first started off, you just had the kayaks, but as you're adding these things like a campground, and you talked about a motel, and you talked about a restaurant, though, this is basically the business growing and people asking for these things.
Right.
And then you're just like, okay, well, let's go ahead and add that.
Right.
To
Well, we didn't just blindly do it either. You know,
Right.
we looked at it, and that's why we then we started. The last thing to mention is our dinner boat cruise. That we have a 50 passenger dinner boat cruise that we run around Grand Island,
Right.
which is right next to the Pictured Rock. It's got rocks taller than the Pictured Rocks, and it's got a lot of history because people live there. You know, Ojibwe Indians live there. There's just a lot of history. It was a game farm at one time.
Right.
You'll all learn about that on the tour going around there. There's some waterfalls and it's just a neat ride. And you get a dinner with it
Right.
in the duck pond. So you eat in the duck pond, and then we go around the island
Sure.
with it too.
And then how many people do you have coming through here in a season, or maybe even a day for that matter? How many people are renting kayaks and going out?
Well, you know, depends on the year and everything, but we've been as high as over 20,000.
Sweet
Okay.
Moses.
And you know, on our kayaking trips.
Right.
But a lot of people, they're not all going kayak. That's just kayaking as far as who stays in our motel and our campgrounds and our boat cruise and eats at the restaurant. You know, they're not all kayakers. So
Right.
I would imagine 40, 50,000 people every year go through here. And that's not in a year. That's in a 100-day period.
Right.
Our season basically runs from the middle of June to the middle of September.
Right.
That's about 90, 100 days, so.
And then well, I guess then the next question is based on what you just said there. If you've got a 100-day business cycle, what do you do for the rest of the year?
We close it all down.
Now, how did you, because I know you said before that you were into charter fishing, which is kind of like, I could see how that could start to lead into more boating. But how did you start the charter fishing business in the first place?
Um, I grew up on a lake in Indiana. I've had boats all my life, pretty much. I lived on the water.
Right.
I have a merchant marine officer's license for nearshore and Great Lakes, so I got that.
Right.
It ran along with flying a lot. It was something that I could study and learn and pass all the tests and training for.
Yeah.
Because so much of it was the same as navigation and weather, and that you get involved in flying
Right.
too. So that's kind of how I got into that. And originally, I mean, the very first day I bought a boat, and I was just doing tours around Marquette. Okay, charter tours, but they weren't necessarily fishing, just sightseeing. But everybody wanted to go fishing, so you follow the path, follow the money.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted to do. So we turned it into fishing, and I had a couple fishing captains that worked for me because I was still flying then. I was gone a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's how I got into that. And that's how we got into the boat cruises over here too.
Sure.
It's because I don't do the trips anymore, but I have a license and could do it if I wanted to.
I'm loving this recurring theme throughout this interview that you are basically just listening to your customers,
Sure.
what they want, and then you just provide it to them.
Sure. I mean, I just because I like it don't mean everybody else does.
That's true.
I mean, there's a lot of food that I like that some people probably don't, but I would never. Same in my restaurant, I sell what people want.
Is this something that, because you made a comment a couple times off mic about how you love sales.
Mhm.
So now that is one of the biggest things with sales is just listening to what people want and then giving it to them. Is this something that you just kind of learned along the way? Did somebody sit you down one day and say, hey, the secret to sales is just listening? Where did that come from?
Well, it is. I'll go back there. Remember when I talked about the flood.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. And the guy calls me from New Hampshire, and he says, I want to come out and rent 20 canoes. And here's my credit card. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell him I just had 2 canoes. I let him talk and give me his credit card number, and I listened, and that's how it happened.
Right.
Yeah, you have to listen to people. You probably need to listen more than you need to talk.
That is true. That is true.
Really is.
And if somebody is listening to this and they want to come and check out Paddling Michigan, where can they find you online, in person?
Best way to find us is paddlingmichigan.com. That's our main website. It's got all of our subsidiaries on it. It's got a cruises page. It's got a lodging page. It's got a kayaking page. It's all right on there. It's very easy to use, and that's the best way to find us online.
Perfect.
If you're in Munising, we're at 1331 West Munising Avenue is our headquarters, and you can come in to our main office and our gallery and everything. You can see a lot of pictures and videos of what we do and everything. And that's right on the west end of Munising, 1331 West Munising Avenue.
Nice. Bill, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. We really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Cliff.
And for our audience, you can always roll on over to totalmichigan.com, click on Bill's interview, and get the links that he mentioned above. We'll see you next time when we talk to another Michigander doing some pretty extraordinary things. We'll see you then.